So as you can see on my desktop, I have my internal hard drive and I have an external hard drive that is used for time machine backups and transferring footage to and from. And I have another external hard drive that I use as a double backup. Attach your drive via USB or USB-C into your machine and you should get a disk or volume sort of come up. If you're finding that you can't find your hard drives on the desktop, then if you just go to the little finder window at the top, go to preferences, and then on the first page you'll see that you've got external disks, hard disks and all that kind of stuff showing. What you'll find as well is that in the finder window on your browser you'll see that you have locations just over here, so we can look through those drives as needed. So the first thing that you want to do when you get a new drive is format it. So I want this to work ideally on both Mac and PC. So I'm going to go to the top kind of taskbar at the top of this window. I'm going to go to the Spotlight search and then I'm going to type in disk util and it'll bring up the disk utility app. And then on the disk itself, so that untitled disk, I'm going to format this. I can erase APFS or APFS encrypted, either one's fine. We want to make sure that we encrypt our drives to keep our data safe. And then press choose. And then I'm going to give the disk title, so disk 2, erase. And then this will go through the formatting process and it will go through the encryption process as well. So if I just eject that disk, re-inject the disk back in, you'll see what will happen whenever you kind of plug that into a machine. So it comes up with a prompt to unlock the drive. Once I enter that in, I'm free to be able to use this and transfer information across as needs be. So the next step that we want to make is starting to create a file structure or folder structure for our edit. So on my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder. So I can right click and then do new folder, or you can do file, new folder from there. Or if you want to do the keyboard shortcut, you can do Command Shift N. I'm going to call this one tutorial. And I'm going to call this today's date, which is the 4th of the 11th, 22. And then just hit enter, and that'll enter the folder name. And then I'm going to go into the folder, and then if you want to, you can change your view on the files at the top there. And I'm just going to create another new folder in there. So I'm going to call this one footage, and then just another one. I'm going to call this one audio, and another one. I'm going to call this one project files, and then I'm going to call another one, and I'm going to call this one GFX, and another one, and I'll call this pre-prod. In my footage, I want to actually create 2 new folders, and you'll see why in a second. So I'm going to call one proxy, and I'm going to call one high res. The second part is that we're going to need some kind of footage. So I actually have some footage on my other external hard drive at the minute, which is what we kind of used for the session. So I'm just going to go in here, and then in this proxy folder, I have a bunch of pre-made proxies, and these are going to go in that folder. And then in my main kind of clip folder, I have a bunch of these MXF files, which are the footage or the high-res footage from the camera. So I'm going to take those across, put those in there, and what you'll see is that that starts copying things over from that one hard drive to this folder in here, so the one on my desktop. And then the theory behind this is that if I need to kind of back up my drive, there'll obviously be the backup on the time machine backup, which will back up the desktop and all your documents folders and all that kind of stuff. But then I will also have a secondary backup, which we can just essentially move this folder onto that when we've kind of finished our edit. So I'm going to let that copy and I'll come back to you in a second. Okay, so I have my proxies in here and my high-res media in here. So the theory is that we would use proxies first and then relink to high-res media later after we've done the edit. This is Premiere Pro. The first kind of window that you usually get is this this one here. So you can open this, if you've got it down in dock, you can open it down there. If you've not got it open in your dock, just kind of come to applications, so you can go applications, and then it'll be in your folder in there somewhere, so Adobe Premiere Pro. You can also search for it, again up in the spotlight, and do just Premiere. I'm just going to do a new project, and then it comes up with this window. So the first thing I'm going to do is name my project, and I'm going to name mine But First Coffee. And then we need to give it a location. So we'll go to project location, go choose location, and then go to tutorial, and then, or for me it's tutorial, for you it might be another file location, project files, and then we want to put it in there. Press OK. What we can do here is we can actually kind of like copy some media across. We can create new bins for it and create new sequences for it, but I just turn all these off because I just like to do it a little bit more manually. So we go to the desktop because that's where our footage is, and then go into tutorial, and then go into footage, and then into we essentially need both of these folders. So we can just click on the folder itself and then press create. And that'll just take a minute to import the files over. Yeah, there you go. That's kind of brought them all in. So we should have them roughly in order there, as you can see in the list down in the bottom. And just take a minute just in the background, kind of generating different peak files and preview files and all that kind of stuff for us to be able to watch it. If you're not familiar with this window, sometimes like it might come up with a kind of different layout. If we go to window and then workspaces, and then what you'll find is you've got these kind of different layouts. So whilst I'm kind of assembling the project, I'm going to go into assembly mode so that we have like a bigger kind of project bin window for me to use. The kind of first thing I like to do is just create a couple of folders that are called bins. So you can do this in a couple of ways. I can either right click somewhere and then do new bin, or I can do Command B and that will create a new bin. The file, new, and then bin. I'm going to call this one footage. Now if you've got a bin selected and you do a new bin or a folder, it's going to put that within that bin. Sometimes it's a little easier kind of using the icon view. For some people, they kind of prefer that. So within this, I'm going to do a new bin. Call this one high res. And then do another one. Call this one proxy. Okay, and then I'm just going to save the project. So Command S will save. We can do File, Save. Okay, so I'm just going to select the proxies and move those into that proxy folder. So, have that open and move that, or it was here for now, and then back over to the project window. So what I want to do now is just go into my list view, and essentially I'm just going to click and drag a load of these ones that say proxy next to it. These ones I can hold shift whilst I'm in a list and kind of go to the top and bottom, and then yeah, that's one way that you can select a bunch of files. Again, move those into the thing there, and then again just make sure that I change this to lists, and then this one I'm just gonna shift and then move that into the high res. Now I want to create another bin, and I'm going to call this one audio, and then again I'm going to do another bin and I call this one GFX, and another bin, call this one captions. If I can spell it correctly. Captions. I'll have another sequence, another bin, and I'll call this one sequences. So I have my footage in, and I want to start creating sequences. So in this folder, I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to do a new item and then a sequence. So this ideally wants to be the size of the footage that you're using. So if it's off your cameras, if you use something like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras, then you might have shot in 1920, 1080 or 4K. You also want to make sure that it's the right frame rate. So again, it matches your footage that you shot. And again, if we conforming to PAL standards, it's 24, 25, 50 or 60 frames. And then again, I'm going to be using square pixels. We haven't got any kind of anamorphic or de-squeezing going on. And then for our fields, we're going to be using progressive scan. And then the audio sample rate is going to be 48 kilohertz or 48,000 hertz. So you can change all these over in this new sequence settings panel here. So we can just do settings and then kind of change this to what we want. So the footage that I actually shot for this this piece is full 4K, so it's 4096 by 2160. And then for the video previews, we want iframe, MPEG only, and then roughly kind of that size is fine. And then we can create the, we can just give the sequence a name down at the bottom here. So going back to the window, I'm still in my assembly workspace. So if I go to Window, Workspaces, and then to Editing, it'll pop up to kind of more friendly workspace for me to use. So I want to make sure when you kind of get ready to kind of put footage over and all that kind of stuff, that you don't just take a piece of footage and put it on a timeline. That's not a great way to do it, because the sequence will then conform to the standard of the clip, and we actually want the clip to conform to the standard of the sequence. So I have my sequence up here, and then I'm just going to start by going into the footage, and then I'm just going to change this over to the list view actually, just so I can kind of see the footage in the little thumbnails. I've got my, like I say, I've got my kind of clips in order. I didn't shoot everything in order, but I have them in a sequential order in here. And if you need to rename any sequences or anything like that, you can do that at any point really. But you can press enter and that will bring up the name. So I'm actually going to change this to Slate 1 just to prove the point. I'm just going to bring this first shot up in the source window, and then I have a kind of little blue bar across here. This is called the playhead, and then if I'm using it to kind of scrub through, it becomes the scrubbing tool. So this is the scrub tool just on here as well, or playhead just on there. This one is linked to the clip, and then this one is linked to the program window just over here. And then I have kind of different buttons that will do kind of different things around here. So if I want to kind of drag the video down onto the timeline, I can do it in a couple of ways. I can just kind of drag a clip in, or I can use just drag the video, or I can drag just the audio from it, or I can kind of insert it onto the timeline like that, or I can kind of overlay or overwrite bits of footage. I'll go through these in a second. Underneath the timeline, you have kind of ways in which you can shrink the timeline down and get very precise with the frames, or you can spread it out and get kind of a bit imprecise with where you're starting and ending clips. You then have kind of mark functions. You have marking in and out, which will kind of create a small section of the clip. And then you have kind of going to those in and out. You've got clear in those in and outs. And you have kind of play and skip backwards and skip forwards by a certain amount of frames. And then you have just, kind of play or play just into out. And then you have like the ability to kind of loop some of your playback as well. I want to kind of take this piece of footage. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to press I for in, or you can use the mark in button just down there. And then I'm going to go to a part that kind of makes sense for it to end. So roughly around there. So press O. And then that's going to be my first slate. So I'm going to bring that down into the timeline, or if you want to again use your keyboard shortcuts, you can press the comma button and that will insert it down into the timeline. And then what I would do is go back into sequences, create a new sequence, so Command N, and then I'm going to use the preset that I made, so it's Proxies High Res. Press OK. So next clip, then we want the proxy. So this is slate 2, so let's find a couple of shots in here. So we've got a couple of shots. We've got a pull focus. So again, I, spacebar to play and stop. O will set the out point, and then again, I'll just use the comma. That'll insert it down into the sequence. If I want to kind of zoom in or out on the sequence, I can use the equal to zoom in and the minus key to zoom out. There's actually another shot I want to use in here as well, or I could use in here. I think is a go from there. I, O. I'm actually going to insert this after the last clip. So the next step I want to do is create a rush. So I'm going to create a new sequence, and I'm just going to use that preset again, and then I'm going to call this one edit, and then V1 for version 1, and then rush for the type of sequence that it is. So I'll press OK. So creating my rush, then I'm going to go back into my clip, and then I'm going to find the piece that I want and insert that in using the comma key. If you want to kind of bring other slates over into your main part for editing, you can do that. You can bring it across, and what it will do is it will bring the video and audio over just for the length of that this sequence is. So you can do it that way, or you can just do if you do the unnested clips or insert and overwrite sequences as nest or individual clips. If you just click on that, again, when you bring that slate in, it'll bring, we want to keep existing settings, it'll bring it in as individual clips as well. So let's do the example with slate 2. So you can see that that split that down into those two shots that we had. So we had the pull focus, and then we had the zoom out. Find new endpoint, and then come up there. O, and then again, I just want to insert that at the end of that playhead. So again, the playhead will move forward to the end of the other clip, and again, if I want to get back or forwards through the play clips, I can just use the up or down key. I, spacebar to play, spacebar to stop, O, and then again, I'm just going to use the insert. My next shot I want is, let's have a look. So we've got kind of putting a pod in there. Now I think I got a shot of getting pods off the shelf. So let's have a look. Yeah, there it is. So let's then let's get that shot again of the putting it into the machine. In roughly, out roughly. We've got this shot here. In fact, we kind of missed a step there, so we've got, I want to get a spoon out of here, so let's move this footage along, and then, okay, we've got a shot here of a spoon. So in, spacebar, let's do that again. Then I'll just insert that down and then move it along to the, you can either move it along and snap it onto the last clip, or you can click in an empty space, right click, and then ripple delete, and that'll do that. Again, you can do the same here as well, and that'll move that all back, clip it together. Okay, so we've done our rush, but I'm not quite happy with this. There's still kind of more perfections that we can make. First things first, I'm going to rescale the video to the size of the frame, just so we can kind of see everything and it looks decent. So I'm going to press Command A, and then I'm going to right click and go down to scale to frame size, scale it up to the 4K resolution. This is my rush sequence. What I'm going to do is duplicate this. So if I just go right click, duplicate, and then I'm just going to rename it as well. Rename this trim, TRIM, and then open that sequence. So another thing that I'm going to do is create a out marker on my timeline so that I know I want this piece to be exactly 60 seconds. So I am going to kind of cut it to time. So we can faff about trying to get our playhead in the 1 minute mark exactly, or we can just go to this playhead position here and just click on it, and then we'll just type in the time code. So it goes in hours, minutes, and seconds. 00 hours dot 01 minutes dot 00 seconds dot 00 frames. Press enter, and that will go to the 1 minute mark exactly. If I then just press O, it creates this out marker on the whole timeline. Now, just be aware of this, that when we come to kind of render it and export it, what you'll find is that it won't export anything past this point. So if you have bits of footage that kind of come out of here, this is quite a useful technique if you've got kind of extra things on your timeline that you don't want anymore, and you only want to kind of export just a minute of the footage. This is quite a useful technique to use. Now, I'm not quite happy with the kind of pace that that's going at, so I'm going to go like a little bit further along and find a point where I think that I can. So I want it to kind of like be slightly out of focus on the face, slightly in the focus in the background, and then kind of finish that little kind of bit of the track and focus. There's a couple of ways that you can kind of like cut this stuff now. So you can do a trim type of cut, which just essentially means, yeah, I can just do one snip and that's it. Or I can do a kind of bit of a clunkier method, which is to use the razor blade tool, use the cut, and then cut across all of this. And what you'll see when I kind of do the cut is that it actually snaps to this playhead using those little kind of markers there. That's because snapping is on, so the little magnet just here. So you can turn that on or off just by pressing S, and that'll turn the snapping on or off. So I can press cut. It'll cut along all of the channels because everything's linked using that link selection. And then I can press V for my arrow. Click on the piece that I don't want, and then I can press backspace. And that's one way of doing it. However, it's a little bit clunky because now I need to kind of move everything back. And normally the way that, again, people would do this is they would press Command A, kind of select everything, and then just drag everything backwards. And again, that's perfectly fine, but there are other ways that you can do this as well. So if I just bring everything back and kind of unmake all the cuts. If I press the, if I just kind of float over the start of this clip, you'll see that my icon changes for my cursor. So I kind of click here, it selects the whole start range. So this effectively like does the trim. So if I just click and drag and kind of bring it along, you'll see that it's trimming all of the start part off to that playhead, and it just kind of, yeah, just goes to the playhead basically. There's also another tool that we can use called the ripple edit. So if I use that, you'll see that the icon then goes yellow instead of red. So if I use this ripple edit, what will happen is when I go to there, it'll cut or trim everything off before that playhead point, and then it'll actually just push everything backwards. So let's do the two and compare. Again, if I just use the selection, and then I've got my trim, and I find the part that I wanted to get rid of. So we were roughly sort of there, yeah? So I've got my playhead there. And then if I use the trim and just kind of take it to there, all it's going to do is just remove the space. Remove the start kind of in point of the clip, basically. And then it will leave me with this empty space. But I actually want to kind of bring everything forward of this point, so forward of this playhead. I want to bring all this backwards, right? So this is a really good tool to use. However, just be aware that if you have things that are synced up in a timeline to kind of music or anything like that, with kind of certain hit points, or there's kind of certain sounds on certain actions, and just be aware when you do use Ripple Edit, if they are locked in place, or if they're kind of maybe further along, kind of here, for example, it might be that when you move everything back, that then desyncs from the clip that it's for. It is, it is a very useful tool, but just be aware that it's not the only tool and not the only way that you can do it. So that looks a bit better. However, I want it to kind of come out a bit earlier. So again, I can use the trimming tool and kind of bring this back if needs be, and then kind of have it snap to that bar, and then right click and ripple delete and kind of bring everything forward. Backwards, sorry, or I can just, like I say, undo and use the ripple just B, and then bring that there, and then it'll just do that, bring everything backwards. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, so I'm not kind of very happy with like how long again that's on. So let's have it slightly sort of coming in slightly later. So again, just kind of ripple that backwards a bit. Okay, so I don't actually like that. So that clip, I'm just going to select the clip. Again, I'm just going to press V to get my selection tool, click on the clip, and then to ripple delete a clip, you can just press Alt and then backspace, and it will get rid of the clip in between and kind of butt those two back together. And if you want to zoom in or out on your timeline, you can just press equals whilst you're in your timeline to kind of zoom it up a little bit. If you find that it's getting a little bit hard to see, you can also press Alt and plus, and that will extend and expand the tracks. You can also expand the tracks just by kind of clicking at the side here and then expanding these out a little bit more. Or you can use the timeline display settings and then use expand all tracks, and that'll expand everything out for you as well. We can use we can either use the cutting tool, or we can use the ripple edit, bring everything backwards a bit. So I quite like that cut. It's would have been nice if I managed to kind of frame them exactly the same. Afterthought's always an interesting one. I mean, I didn't storyboard this or anything, it was just kind of shot very off the cuff. Again, it's that, I don't know, it's a bit kind of a disturbing, so I'm going to take that shot out. Alt, backspace. We've actually, if I look at the timeline now, we've managed to trim a lot off. If anything, we've probably trimmed way too much off, because we've got quite a big gap now. To the end of that piece of footage, we have that at 53 seconds and 10. Yeah, the last frame is at 1 minute. So we've got 7 seconds and 14 frames to fill. So let's select everything forward of the play bar. So if I do the track select forward, and then click at the start. It'll select everything forward of the playhead, and then I'm just going to move everything along to the end there, and then what I'm going to do is just bring that start piece back out again. Okay, yeah, that was a fairly easy fix. Just take that to the end. Go right in. We're at yeah. We've got literally one frame over. So we can just take that to 0, and then we're just going to take that frame in. Okay. Brilliant. So we are at 1 minute exactly.